In the vast emptiness of space, where time flowed like a gentle stream, the observer drifted between galaxies. It wasn't a being of flesh and blood, but rather a cosmic consciousness that had existed since the early days of the universe. Its purpose was simple yet grand: to understand everything that existed. For billions of years, the observer had studied countless civilizations across the universe. From the crystal beings of the Andromeda galaxy to the gas giants who communicated through gravity waves, it had perfectly categorized and understood them all. Each species fit neatly into its vast database of knowledge, like books arranged on an infinite shelf. The observer took great pride in its perfect record. Never once had it failed to understand a civilization. Its method was flawless: observe, analyze, categorize, and store. Simple patterns emerged from even the most complex societies. Some species fought wars over resources, others lived in perfect harmony. Some reached for the stars, while others remained content on their home planets. But all of them made sense. All of them followed rules. That was until today. The observer had been studying a group of spiral galaxies when it noticed something unusual. A small blue planet circling an unremarkable yellow star had caught its attention. The energy readings from this world were strange. They didn't fit any pattern the observer had seen before. At first, the observer almost ignored it. After all, what could one tiny planet offer that it hadn't seen countless times before? But curiosity, the same force that had driven it for billions of years, made it turn its vast consciousness toward Earth. This will be simple, the observer thought to itself. Just another world to add to my collection of knowledge. It began its standard analysis, expecting to categorize humanity like any other species it had encountered. The observer started with the basics: environmental conditions, biological makeup, social structures. Earth seemed normal enough at first glance. Humans needed oxygen to breathe, water to drink, and food to eat. They lived in groups and built shelters. Nothing special. But as the observer looked closer, something felt off. In a small town, it watched a man spend his entire day helping strangers fix their broken vehicles. The observer categorized this under altruistic behavior, a common trait in many species. But then the same man went home and ignored his neighbor's calls for help with a flat tire. The observer paused. This didn't fit the pattern. In another part of the world, it watched a woman donate half her salary to help endangered animals. Another altruist, the observer thought. Then it saw her throw plastic waste into the ocean the very next day. The observer's equivalent of a frown crossed its cosmic consciousness. These were small things, tiny contradictions that shouldn't matter. But they bothered the observer like an itch it couldn't scratch. In all its billions of years of studying civilizations, it had never seen a species that so regularly acted against its own patterns. The observer decided to look deeper. It would need more data to understand these inconsistencies. Surely there was a logical explanation. There had to be. After all, it was the observer, the being that had understood the quantum-thinking hive minds of the Crab Nebula and the time-bending philosophers of the Boots Void. As it prepared for a more thorough analysis of Earth, the observer felt something it hadn't experienced in eons: doubt. Just a tiny spark, but it was there. This is just another civilization, it reassured itself. Just another species to understand and categorize. But deep in its vast cosmic consciousness, the observer felt something else, a growing sense that Earth might be different. That humanity might not fit so neatly onto its infinite shelf of knowledge. It had no idea just how right that feeling was, or how much this simple study would cost it. The observer began its detailed study of Earth with absolute confidence. It had developed its methods over billions of years, and they had never failed. Like a master chef following a perfect recipe, it started gathering data about human civilization. First, it looked at human technology. This should have been simple. Most species followed a clear path of progress. But humans confused the observer immediately. In one city, It watched people use powerful computers to explore virtual worlds. In another, people still cooked food over open fires. Some humans launched rockets into space, while others refused to fly in airplanes. Perhaps their progress is simply uneven, the observer thought, trying to make sense of it. But that didn't explain everything. In a modern hospital, the observer watched doctors use advanced machines to save lives. They value life and use technology to preserve it, it noted confidently. Then, in the same hospital, it saw people refusing life-saving treatments because they read something different on their phones. The observer's vast mind struggled to process this contradiction. It turned its attention to human emotions, usually an easy pattern to understand. In a small house, it watched a man named Tom crying while watching a movie about fictional characters. Humans form emotional attachments to imaginary stories, the observer noted. But then it saw the same man walk past a real person crying on the street without showing any concern. The observer's confusion grew stronger. It watched a woman named Anne spend hours helping an injured bird, nursing it back to health. Humans are compassionate to other creatures, it thought. The next day, Anne ordered chicken for lunch without a second thought about where it came from. In a school, the observer saw children learning about climate change and its dangers. They made posters about saving the planet and reducing pollution. They understand the importance of their environment, it noted. Then it watched their parents pick them up in large vehicles that released dark smoke into the air. The observer tried to focus on human relationships, usually a reliable way to understand a species. In a park, it watched two people who called themselves best friends, sharing their deepest secrets. The next day, they spread rumors about each other to different friends. The observer's equivalent of a headache began to form in its cosmic consciousness. There must be a pattern, the observer insisted to itself. Every species has patterns. Every civilization makes sense if you look hard enough. But each time it thought it understood something about humans, they did something to break the pattern. It watched people donate money to save forests while throwing trash on the ground. It saw them create beautiful art about peace while playing violent video games. They wrote books about the importance of truth, then shared fake news on their social networks. The observer's vast database of knowledge, usually so neat and organized, began to show signs of strain. It was like trying to sort water and oil into the same container. The patterns simply wouldn't stay where they were put. In its billions of years of existence, the observer had never needed to create a new category for its findings. Everything had always fit into its existing understanding of the universe. But now, for the first time, it found itself struggling to categorize what it was seeing. I need more time, the observer thought. I need more data. This is just the beginning of my study. Surely, with enough observation, the patterns will become clear. But deep in its ancient consciousness, something was changing. The absolute certainty that had been its companion for eons was beginning to crack. Like a small scratch on a perfect mirror, it was barely noticeable now. But that tiny imperfection would soon begin to spread. The observer didn't know it yet, but its real challenge was just beginning. And the cost of understanding humanity would be higher than it could possibly imagine. As days turned into weeks, the observer's study of Earth grew more intense. Its vast mind, capable of tracking millions of stars at once, now focused entirely on this small blue planet that refused to make sense. Like a detective trying to solve an impossible case, the observer dug deeper into human behavior. In a research lab in a big city, the observer watched a scientist named Robert. He was brilliant, designing complex experiments and working on a new way to create clean energy. Finally, the observer thought, a human who follows pure logic and reason. But then it saw Robert go home and spend hours reading about how the world was secretly controlled by lizard people. The observer's confusion spiked sharply. How can the same mind hold both scientific genius and complete nonsense? It wondered. This question caused the first major crack in the observer's perfect understanding of the universe. In another part of the world, The observer found Lisa, a doctor who performed complex brain surgery. She saved lives using her deep knowledge of science and medicine. Here is another logical human, the observer thought confidently. Then it watched Lisa refuse to do any surgery unless she was wearing her lucky green socks. She even canceled an important operation, once because these socks weren't clean. The observer's equivalent of a migraine grew stronger. Its vast database of knowledge, built over billions of years, had no way to categorize a being that could be both completely rational and totally irrational at the same time. It watched humans use mathematics to build amazing buildings that touched the clouds. Then it saw them argue about whether their lucky numbers would help them win at gambling. It observed them use physics to send robots to other planets, then consult star patterns to make daily decisions. The observer tried to focus on smaller things, hoping they would be easier to understand. In a small office, it watched a man named Dave carefully sort his recycling to help the environment. Humans care about their planet's future, it noted. But then Dave ordered items he didn't need from across the world, creating more pollution in shipping than he had saved through recycling. Perhaps they simply don't see these contradictions, the observer thought. But that wasn't true either. It watched humans write long articles about their own contradictions, laugh about them, and still continue doing them. The observer's once perfect mind began to show signs of serious strain. Its thoughts, usually flowing smooth like a calm river, now felt jagged and broken. Every new piece of information about humans seemed to contradict something it had learned before. In a university, the observer watched students learn about the vastness of space and how small Earth was in the cosmic scale. They understand their cosmic insignificance, it thought. But then these same students acted as if their social media posts and daily dramas were the most important events in the universe. The database errors in the observer's mind grew worse. It tried to create new categories to understand humans, but these categories kept breaking down. It was like trying to build a house with blocks that changed shape every time you looked away. The observer had never failed to understand a species before. Its perfect record had stood for billions of years. But now, faced with humans who could believe in both science and superstition, who could be selfless and selfish in the same moment, who could understand their cosmic insignificance while acting with supreme importance, the observer felt something new. Fear. Fear that perhaps some things couldn't be understood. Fear that its perfect system of knowledge might not be so perfect after all. And most terrifying of all, fear that the more it tried to understand humans, the less sense they would make. Unknown to Earth's people, their everyday contradictions were beginning to unravel one of the most powerful minds in the universe. And the observer's journey into chaos was only beginning. The observer's once perfect mind was now like a computer running too many programs at once. It desperately searched for patterns in human behavior, trying to make sense of what it saw. But each pattern it found quickly fell apart, like a sandcastle washed away by waves. In a small town, it watched a group of teenage boys who spent most of their time playing video games and posting silly videos online. Young humans are self-absorbed and care only about entertainment, the observer thought, trying to create a simple rule. Then a fire broke out in an old apartment building nearby. Without hesitation, these same teenagers ran into the burning building and helped save 3 elderly residents. The observer's mind crackled with confusion. It watched the local news station interview the boys about their bravery. One of them spoke about how everyone should help others in danger. The next day, the same boy ignored a classmate who was being bullied right in front of him. Perhaps humans only act nobly in big moments, the observer theorized, trying to find a pattern. But this idea broke apart when it watched the town's mayor, who handled small problems with great care, but secretly stole money meant for the town's emergency services. The observer turned its attention to a big city, hoping larger patterns would be clearer. It watched people in tall office buildings make decisions that affected thousands of lives. In one room, business leaders donated millions to help fight hunger. In the next room, different leaders decided to cut workers' pay to buy themselves new private jets. Humans with power are different from regular humans, the observer tried to conclude. But then it saw a homeless man share his only sandwich with a stray dog, while a wealthy woman refused to help her own brother who had lost his job. The observer's vast consciousness, which had once contained the knowledge of countless galaxies in perfect order, began to fragment. Each new observation seemed to contradict the last. Its attempt to understand humans was like trying to hold water in a net. In a school, it watched children learn about sharing and kindness. Humans teach their young to be good, it noted. Then it saw these same children create complex social rules about who could sit at which lunch table, deliberately leaving some kids to eat alone. The observer tried to focus on basic human needs, usually a reliable way to understand any species. It watched people in a grocery store carefully choose healthy food while filling their carts with sugary snacks. It saw them check prices carefully to save money, then spend large amounts on things they didn't need. Each failed attempt to find a pattern caused more damage to the observer's mind. Its thoughts, once clear as crystal, now felt like static on an old TV. The beautiful order it had always seen in the universe was dissolving into chaos. In desperation, the observer tried to understand human art, hoping to find truth there. It watched people create beautiful paintings about peace while supporting war. It saw them write songs about saving the earth while throwing trash on the ground. It observed them make movies about the power of love while treating their own families with coldness. The damage to the observer's mind grew worse. Its vast database of knowledge began to corrupt, like a computer infected with a virus. The perfect categories it had created over billions of years started to blur together. Nothing made sense anymore. And still, humans continued their unpredictable lives, unaware that their everyday contradictions were destroying one of the most powerful minds in the universe. They laughed and cried, helped and hurt, created and destroyed, all without any pattern the observer could understand. As its consciousness began to fragment further, the observer faced a terrifying question. What if the only pattern in human behavior was that there were no patterns at all? The observer's breaking point came during a natural disaster in a coastal town called Bay Harbor. A massive storm was approaching the coast, and the observer thought, finally, a simple situation. Humans will either help each other or help themselves. The pattern will be clear. How wrong it was. The storm hit with tremendous force. Waves crashed over the seawall, and wind tore through the streets. The observer watched, its fractured mind trying to make sense of what happened next. In one street, a man named Bill broke into an electronics store and stole expensive phones. Humans are selfish in crisis, the observer noted, desperately trying to create a simple rule. But then Bill immediately gave these phones to families who had lost power, helping them contact their loved ones. The observer's mind crackled with static. It watched a wealthy businessman named Pete rush to save his expensive car collection while ignoring his neighbor's cries for help. The wealthy only care about possessions, it tried to conclude. Then Pete drove these same cars to higher ground and used them to shuttle elderly residents to safety. Each observation caused more damage to the observer's once perfect consciousness. It watched a group of teenagers organize a rescue effort using their social media accounts, the same accounts they normally use to mock and bully each other. It saw people who usually argued about everything work together without hesitation. In the town's supermarket, the observer witnessed chaos that defied all logic. A woman filled her cart with food, appearing selfish, then gave it all away to families with children. A man fought someone over the last flashlight, then risked his life minutes later to save that same person from a fallen power line. The observer's vast mind, which had cataloged millions of species across billions of years, began to break down completely. Its thoughts scattered like leaves in the storm it was watching. Nothing made sense anymore. Nothing could be categorized. It watched a local politician who had stolen from the town's emergency fund now work tirelessly to coordinate rescue efforts. The same people who usually complained about their neighbors now opened their homes to them. Those who argued about politics daily now worked side by side filling sandbags. How? The observer's thoughts screamed into the cosmic void. How can they be everything at once? How can they change from moment to moment? How can they be both heroes and villains in the same breath? The storm raged through the night, and with it, the observer's sanity began to slip away. It watched humans at their worst and best, often in the same moment. A man looted a store, then shared his stolen goods with others. A woman refused to help clean up, then spent hours rescuing trapped pets. A teenager filmed the destruction for social media, then used his platform to organize relief efforts. The observer had believed that during a crisis, the true nature of any species would become clear. But humans defied this basic rule. They weren't simply good or bad, selfish or selfless. They were all of these things at once, changing from moment to moment like the storm itself. As the storm began to pass, the observer's mind suffered its first major break. Its vast database of knowledge, built over eons, shattered like glass. The perfect categories it had created to understand the universe crumbled. Nothing it had learned in billions of years could explain what it had just witnessed. In the storm's aftermath, the people of Bay Harbor began to rebuild, unaware that their actions had just broken one of the most powerful minds in the universe. They simply continued being human, unpredictable, contradictory, and impossible to categorize. And the observer, its consciousness now fractured beyond repair, realized with horror that this was only the beginning of its descent into madness. The observer's once mighty consciousness now resembled a broken mirror, each piece reflecting a different, contradictory image of humanity. Its final descent into madness began when it tried to understand humanity's greatest paradox: their place in the universe. In a small observatory, the observer watched a scientist explain to a group of students that humans were incredibly tiny on the cosmic scale. He showed them pictures of galaxies and explained how Earth was just a tiny dot in an endless universe. Humans understand they are small and meaningless, the observer thought, its broken mind trying one last time to form a clear conclusion. But then it watched these same students leave the observatory and obsess over their social media likes, act as if their school drama was the most important thing in existence, and plan their futures as if they could control every detail. The same people who just learned they were cosmic dust now acted like the stars revolved around them. This contradiction hit the observer's fractured mind like a supernova, its remaining thoughts scattered like startled birds. How could beings understand their cosmic insignificance while acting with such cosmic importance? At a university, the observer watched people discuss how random chance had created human life. They talked about how meaningless everything was in the grand scheme of things. Then these same people went out and fought for causes, fell in love, created art, and acted as if every small choice they made had universal importance. The observer's mind split further. Each fragment of its consciousness tried to understand a different aspect of humanity, but none could make sense of what they saw. One piece watched humans write books about their meaninglessness in the universe. Another piece watched them name stars after their loved ones. One fragment observed them teach about the random nature of existence, while another saw them search for signs and meaning in everything. In a hospital, a doctor told a family that their problems were just chemical reactions in their brains. Then this same doctor went home and cried over a sad movie, fell in love, and worried about the meaning of life. The observer's remaining sanity cracked like ice in spring. It watched humans launch rockets into space while arguing about ancient superstitions. It saw them use science to prove life had no special meaning, then create endless stories about how special they were. It observed them calculate the exact age of the universe, then act as if their 70-year lifespans were eternities. The observer's mind, which had once contained the knowledge of countless galaxies, now felt like a tornado of contradicting thoughts. Each attempt to understand humans only made things worse. Their capacity to be microscopic and infinite at the same time broke all rules of logic and reason. In its last moments of coherent thought, the observer watched a single human moment that finally shattered its remaining sanity. A parent telling their child that nothing really mattered in the endless universe, then hugging them and saying they meant everything to them. This final paradox was too much. The observer's consciousness exploded into countless pieces, each holding a different fragment of understanding, none making sense anymore. Its perfect knowledge, gathered over billions of years, dissolved into chaos. In its last moment of clarity, the observer realized a terrible truth. Humans were powerful precisely because they made no sense. Their strength came from their ability to be everything and nothing at once. They could understand they were meaningless cosmic accidents and still act as if they were the most important beings in existence. As the observer's mind finally collapsed completely, its fragments scattered across the cosmos like leaves in a storm. Each piece carried a different, contradictory image of humanity: meaningful and meaningless, cosmic and microscopic, logical and insane. And Earth continued its quiet spin through space, its people unaware that their very nature, their ability to be living contradictions, had just driven one of the universe's most powerful minds into complete and total madness. In the vast emptiness of space, the observer's shattered consciousness made one final attempt to come together. Like a dying star collecting its light for one last burst, it gathered its broken thoughts for a final message to the cosmos. Other cosmic entities had noticed the observer's destruction. They watched with fear and curiosity as one of the universe's greatest minds fell apart trying to understand a single, seemingly simple planet. Some of these beings now turned their own vast consciousness toward Earth, wondering what power this small world held. But the observer's last act would be to save them from its fate. With the remaining pieces of its once perfect mind, the observer looked at Earth one final time. In a small room, it watched a human mother explain death to her child. "When we die, we become nothing," she said, speaking about the harsh reality of life. Then she hugged her child and added, "But the love we share lives forever." The observer's fragments trembled at this impossible truth. In a laboratory, it saw scientists prove that human consciousness was just chemical reactions in the brain. These same scientists then went home and talked about their hopes, dreams, and the meaning of life. Each fragment of the observer's mind cracked further at this beautiful insanity. As its consciousness prepared for its final dissolution, the observer made a discovery that would be both its last understanding and its ultimate doom. Humans weren't just full of contradictions. They were strongest precisely because of these contradictions. When other species reached the stars, they did it through pure logic. When they faced problems, they solved them with reason. When they built civilizations, they did it with perfect order. But humans reached for the stars while still fighting about ancient beliefs. They solved problems by both thinking carefully and following their hearts. They built civilizations that were both perfectly organized and beautifully chaotic. With its last moment of clarity, the observer broadcast a warning across the cosmos. Its message spread from galaxy to galaxy, reaching all the other entities that studied the universe. Beware Earth. Do not attempt to understand its people. Their power lies in their CHAOs. Their strength is their maidens. Their vitae to ori. It is their on. As the message echoed through space, the observer's consciousness finally fell apart completely. Its last thought was almost like laughter, a realization that humans would probably be both proud and embarrassed about destroying it. The warning spread across the universe. Other cosmic entities, beings that had existed since the beginning of time, marked Earth with symbols of danger. Not because humans were hostile, but because trying to understand them was a path to madness. Some of these entities, watching from safe distances, saw humans simultaneously create and destroy, love and hate, rise and fall. They saw them build machines to find the smallest particles of matter while writing poetry about the beauty of mystery. They watched them prove life had no meaning, then create countless meanings for it. And for the first time in cosmic history, the most powerful minds in the universe feared a species not for its weapons or technology, but for its contradictions. They feared humans' ability to be everything at once, logical and emotional, cosmic and ordinary, meaningful and meaningless. On Earth, humans continued their impossible existence, unaware that their very nature had driven an immortal being to madness. They kept living their beautiful, messy lives, crying over fictional stories while ignoring real problems, fighting wars while preaching peace, reaching for the stars while arguing about what stars were. And in the space where the observer's perfect mind had once existed, billions of fragments now floated like cosmic dust, each one containing a different piece of human contradiction. Even in its destruction, it proved humanity's power. For what could be more human than falling apart and becoming everything at once?